Today, the feast of St. Matthew. Matthew, who wrote the first gospel. And on it, he converted the king of Ethiopia after he left Israel. Before he left Israel, he wrote the gospel of St. Matthew, wrote down his preaching, the most written, the most read of all the gospels in our sacred liturgy, in the Mass, and in the breviary. Then he went to Ethiopia. He converted the king, performed many miracles, rose the king's daughter from death to life. And Ethiopia converted. But then the king's son took over, and he did not like the faith. And a near relative of the king wanted to marry the king's daughter. And St. Matthew told her, "You are wed to Christ." And she gave herself over completely to the life of virginity and purity, and was wed to Christ. The young man, relative of the king, wanted to marry her. And she said, "No, I will maintain my purity." Now the man wanted to marry her, he had been baptized, like his father the king, like the relatives of the king. He had entered the true faith. But he became very angry because he wanted to marry this beautiful young girl who was given over to Christ into a life of purity. And he realized the one that did this, the one that made her love purity, the one that made her love Christ, was that man that rose her from the dead, Matthew. And he was extremely angry. He sent soldiers, "Find him and kill him now." St. Matthew did not know that he was going to die a martyr when he celebrated his last Mass. He was celebrating the holy sacrifice of Mass. He was dressed in his sacred vestments. He was at the altar of God, and he thought he was celebrating yet another Mass, which he was. Even though he was a great saint of God, he did not know the time of judgment had come. His work on this earth is finished. And because of the lust of a man who had become a Catholic, now he abandoned the faith because of lust. So many millions would follow him down the next 2,000 years, one of which was Henry VIII, who because of lust left the Catholic faith, who was called the defender of the faith. And anger and lust and the hatred of purity caused a Catholic man who had just converted to leave the faith. Caused him to send soldiers, "Kill him where he is right now." And St. Matthew was celebrating the holy sacrifice of the Mass. And they killed him at the altar. St. Alphonsus reminds us, even in the lives of the saints, God did reveal to some saints the moment they would die, but most saints he did not reveal. We don't know the moment of our own death. We don't know the day that we are going to enter eternity. Where was St. Matthew? On the day and the moment he entered eternity, he was celebrating his daily Mass. He was doing his daily duty. He was united to Christ at the holy altar and died in the most wonderful place where any priest can die, at the sacrifice. Every one of us is going to die. We know not the day or the hour. When my grandfather was in his mid-40s, he had a massive heart attack, triple bypass at the time. He said, "You're not going to live." 16 people, men, gathered around his deathbed. One of them was 16 years old. And he said, "Goodbye, Mr. Pfeiffer." And he said goodbye. And he was at every one of their funerals. those 16, including the 16-year-old, that were standing around his deathbed, knowing he would die in only a few hours, every one of them died before my grandfather. We know not the day or the hour of our death. Many don't believe when it's going to come. This year, for instance, 2022, it's a year of death. More deaths now than any other era. Because they've handed out poisons to us called medicines. I've had so many deaths and funerals this year, hard to keep count. The year of death, and more deaths to come. We know not the day or the hour of our death, but we do know we're every moment closer to it. We do know that we're going to pass to eternity, and when we pass, we're going to be judged. On this altar, in the painting, there is a contemplation of judgment. St. Valentine, the priest in the year 250 AD, was before the Emperor Decius, who was young and just had become emperor. And he told Valentine, I am your judge. St. Valentine said, no, you are not my judge. God is judge. And furthermore, when you tell me to worship false gods, they are devils. And I am the priest of God, and I will tell you, Decius, what is going to happen. If you want to live a long life, and you want to have a long reign, and you want to have peace in your kingdom of Rome, then convert to the Holy Roman Catholic faith, to which I belong, and of which I am a priest of the true God. Emperor, adore the true God, and you will have a long reign and peace. The emperor sat back and thought. But then Valentine told him, but if you do not worship the true God, if you do not this day convert, you have just become the emperor, you will not live out the year. Before this year is ended, you will have gone to judgment. Your kingdom will have come to an end, and you will be dead. How do you know this? I am the representative of God, and I am telling you the truth. Decius thought. And he almost became a Catholic. He almost got baptized. The painting here on the altar is just a moment in which Decius is thinking. Decius is deciding, maybe I should follow Christ. But his priest, his pagan priest, said, don't do it. And they were very angry. Valentine says that you'll have a long reign. But we will guarantee your reign will end, for we have power amongst the people and not his God. We will see to it that you die and your kingdom ends. And Decius was afraid. And he had to decide. Do I believe in these pagan priests who have power amongst the people? Or do I believe in this priest who I'm going to put to death, and whom they want me to put to death? And he weighed it back and forth. He did not know that was the moment, not of the judgment of St. Valentine, but of the judgment of Decius. He finally decided, I can't go against my pagan priests. And he put St. Valentine to death. And only a few weeks or a month later, he was slain and annihilated place, and Datius ruled for less than a year. St. Alphonsus tells us, how long are you going to live? Some say an average of 70 years. No man lives an average of 70 years. You will live until the moment that God says, enough. On this 21st of September, 2,000 years ago, God said, enough, Matthew. You have done enough work in my kingdom on this earth. Now it is time to come to glory. And he allowed him to die while celebrating the holy sacrifice of the Mass, and purify and sanctify all the works that he had done, and prove the truth of his holy gospel, and go to the kingdom of heaven. And also, on this day, there will be several million people that will die. What is going to be the determiner? And who is the determiner of the death? It is God. As it says in Psalm 103, God looks down upon the deer, and it gallops through the forest. God turns his face away, and the deer dies. Every one of us is going to meet judgment. We're either going to meet like St. Matthew, or like St. Valentine, or like any of the saints. Or we're going to meet it like Datius. You know, I'm a young man. I just became emperor. All my friends made me the king. The priest promised me they'll be my defenders, and they will not allow anyone to turn against me. I am secure. All I have to do is kill St. Valentine and many others that he killed, one of the 10 great persecutors who reigned for less than a year. And his kingdom ended. Our Lord Jesus Christ said, you know not the day or the hour in which he will come and visit. For he shall come like a thief in the night. We are all going to meet death, and those that love God, and those that remain faithful to the true faith, God will provide. He will provide. He will not leave us abandoned. And those who turn against him, he will not forget. I remember Father Hannafin, my old pastor, he told me, you know, I noticed in my young priesthood, ordained a priest in 1945, 25 years of priest, they came up with the abomination of the new Mass. I noticed in my first 25 years of priesthood, the majority of priests I knew, who all said the Latin Tridentine Mass, who all taught the great Catholic Catechism, who all said they were good Catholics, the great majority of priests he knew that died in those first 25 years, between 1945 and 1969, 1970, died without extremation, died without confession, died without the sacraments. Surrounded by priests. We priests are around death all the time, very frequently. So when our time comes, oh, I'm not that sick yet. Father, anoint me tomorrow. I'm not in that bad a shape. All right, I'll anoint you tomorrow. I'll hear your confession tomorrow. And in the night, the priest died. So many, all saying the Latin Mass, all traditional. The man that killed St. Matthew, he was a Catholic. He said he believed in the church. He was baptized by St. Matthew. But when St. Matthew said, this girl whom I raised from the dead, she is given to God. And she said, I am given to God. The visitation of lust caused him to lose his faith. And Decius, who was about to become a Catholic, I could become a Catholic next year when situations are better. This man, whom I'm going to condemn to death, he can tell me I'm going to cease to reign. What does he know? These priests that are in power, they know best. God is judge. He is judged when St. Valentine stood before Decius. When St. Venantius was standing in front of the judge said to him, the young boy Venantius, I condemn you to death, and you must be put to death. And when he said those words, an angel struck the judge dead. And Venantius stood healthy, and the judge was dead. So they brought in a second judge. And the second judge said, Venantius, I condemn you to death, for I am the judge, and I'm not afraid that the other one died. Your God can't kill two judges in one day. Guess what happened? There were two dead judges, and Venantius stood strong in perfect health. The third judge came, and he said, Venantius, I'm not only going to put you to death, I'm going to torture you and make you suffer and drag you across the rocks and skin you alive. And that judge did not die. Well, Venantius did not want to just die for Christ. He wanted to suffer. He wanted to experience the pains of the cross. And hence the other two judges said the wrong thing, and they were slain. God determines the moment of death. God determines the moment of our birth. God determines all the moments in between. One day he will say, enough. Satis. Matthew, you've done enough work on this earth. Francis Xavier, 1/2 mile from China, the only place he wanted to go. He traveled all over the world, but only one place did Francis Xavier want to go, to China. He was delayed so many years. Finally, he was allowed to go to China. He was on the island of Anxion. He was 1/2 mile from China. He looked at China, and he caught the fever. He grew sick, and he died. And he never set foot in China. It was not the will of God that Francis Xavier, who wanted to go to China, would ever set foot. God determines the moment of the day, the moment of the hour, the moment that we're going to pass into eternity. And what are we to do? Prepare for that moment by living by God's faith, living by the grace of God, living in our holy faith now. And when God gives a grace to convert, and God gives a grace to a vocation, and God gives a grace to grow into some work that is for His glory, grab onto it. There's an old priest, Father Jahir, told me at 80 years old in Brazil about 10 years ago. He said, grace is like a train. Passing through a train station, perhaps at a very slow speed, so you can easily step upon the train. And one car goes by, and the second car goes by, and the third car goes by, and maybe there's 200 or 300 cars. And we think, I'll get on the next one. I'll get on the next one. But one of them is the final car. And when we decide to get on, the train passes. And then we say, well, the train will be back tomorrow. There'll be another train later today. But God did not promise 2 trains. He did not promise another car. We must respond to grace, and God will take care of us. We will make sure that we receive whatever it is that we need. God will not abandon us. He always provides for those that love Him. But He also provides for those that love Him not. So many priests refuse to do their duty. And the day comes when they're supposed to be anointed. The day comes when they're supposed to be here to have their confession heard, and it doesn't happen. It says in the sacred scripture, the justice of God, who falls upon it, shall be broken. But he who the justice of God falls upon, he shall be ground into powder. And the fathers tell us, when we ask forgiveness and jump on Christ, we are broken. We have to leave behind our life of sin. We have to be broken. We have to experience a little pain. We have to make reparation for our sins. But he who does not jump upon the rock and is not broken, upon him the rock shall fall. The rock shall come down from heaven and shall ground him into powder. He shall not be broken. He shall be smashed into little bits that can never be reassembled, and he shall be buried in hell. But everyone will meet the rock. Everyone will meet the judgment of the just Christ. For he who loves us with an infinite love, he also judges us with an infinite justice. He is infinite in his love, infinite in his mercy, and infinite in his justice. All parts of him are infinite, not just one part. And we are reminded at the time of death, as we'll say at the tomb, for those standing bystanders, we say the prayer at the tomb when we get to the cemetery, we let all those standing here remember that as our servant has gone to judgment, so we shall follow also. Let's not forget, we are going to follow also. And if we're faithful, God will provide for us. Let us be faithful. Keep our holy faith. Remember that judgment is near. The whole world is about to be judged. And we must find ourselves the friends of Christ when this judgment comes. And then it doesn't matter. Matthew was judged and came to heaven. On this day, September 21st, 2,000 years ago. Jesus was judged in the year 250, 200 years after Matthew. And he is not in the kingdom of heaven. And everyone shall be judged. And we know not the day or the hour. But let us be prepared by living according to the true faith, grabbing the graces that are sent to us. Don't let the grace train go by, but go into the car and follow Christ where he leads. And after the Mass today, with the blessing of the body, Liber Amen. Then prayer for the close of Mr. Frank. Then we'll head on to the cemetery and do the final blessing there, and then return back to here. Those are the bless you all, in the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Domino